Ah! No! No! What have you done? What have you done? What have you done? You're in the wrong place! You're in the wrong place! Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to try and redo the polar bear habitat. I love the way that the Viking lake house turned out, so I'm going to keep that video up, but the habitat itself looked kind of awful, so I'm going to see if I can go and jazz it up. So we're going to resume. Alright. So if we have a look, like, it is really quite plain. So the first thing on the list was to fix the lake. I've already got rid of the original underwater viewing area. The view was terrible, the bears didn't go out there, even the guests were scratching their heads going, where on earth are the polar bears? So what I decided to do was to still have the underwater viewing area, but we're going to move that into the middle of the lake to give the guests better views and to make it a bit more interesting. And then the other thing that I wanted to fix was how bland this part of the habitat was. So I'm using the terrain tools to add in some kind of mountain range effects. And then to give it a rocky texture, one of the things that I used was the pull tool, moved the size right down to sort of about 1 or 2, kept the intensity at maximum, and then if you just draw a random pattern over the terrain that you've already raised, it helps give it that rocky effect. And then I also decided that I wanted to add some more terrain effects where I wanted the viewing platform to be at the side. So I'm just using the terrain stamp tools to create some steps to give a bit more interest to the area, and then I'm using the actual tools to kind of finesse it and make it look more natural and a bit more realistic. So I really like using this technique to add in that kind of rock textures and that sort of thing. It's a lot faster than placing in all the rocks manually, and I think it creates a better effect because with the actual terrain manipulation tools you can get some really unique shapes. The other thing to be aware of is as you're using these tools you can actually create little pockets where the animals can get stuck, and if an animal gets stuck the game will end up freaking out and going, oh my god, you've put the animal in a habitat where it hasn't even got room to breathe, ah! You won't have messed up, it's just that the game's got confused and the animals got lost and is being a bit stupid. So to avoid that from happening, just make sure that you don't have any of those pockets as you're going around and manipulating the terrain. So at this point I'm just going and smoothing terrain to make sure that the bears can get everywhere that I want them to get. So actually they can get over a lot of this mountain range, which means that they have a bit more enrichment as they're kind of wandering and exploring around. And actually you can see here as it updates, all the blue is all the area that they can get to. And then at this point I'm going to go in with the rocks that come with the game, and I'm just going to add a bit more texture and try and create a bit more realism. So when I'm placing the rocks, a couple of things that I look for is major terrain changes. So if there is quite a steep change in terrain and that wouldn't really be supported by gravity in real life, I like to go and put rocks in and kind of create this barrier effect so that the dirt's being held up by the rocks rather than just, in-game physics. And then the other thing is when I place rocks, I don't like placing them in isolation, so I like to put them in little clusters and then scatter rocks between those clusters just to help pull texture all the way through the habitat and make it look more realistic and visually appealing. So with this little cluster here, I'm actually going in with the snow rocks just to help blend the texture of the terrain with the texture of the rocks. And then at this point here, I'm going to go in and create basically a dry moat because I want to get rid of the concrete wall at this point just so I can have a nice little viewing area. And I want the guests and the bears to get nice and close without either killing each other. So here I get rid of the concrete barrier, make it into a null barrier just to give the guests an unimpeded view. And then because there is quite a steep terrain difference here, and just to make it look a bit more realistic, I go and add in a couple of clusters of rocks just to create that barrier effect. And then because there is quite a big gap between these two clusters, I decided to put in some rocks just to carry that texture forward and where I was talking about earlier. And then I'm going to use the fence that comes with the Arctic pack and just reinforce to guests that this is actually the polar bear habitat. Please don't go in here unless you want to be eaten. And then once I've got all of these fences placed, I will go and fine tune the movement and make sure they're embedded into the concrete walls and just make the transition between those two fencing types a bit smoother. So the next thing on the list was to put in the underwater viewing area, and one of my viewers had a really good idea of using the shipwreck piece, so thank you very much. So at this point I place that shipwreck piece, but I place it above the ground, and then I use the basically shadow to show me where I can and can't place the path. And then I connect the underwater viewing area to the main path using an underground tunnel. Because of all the snow, it's actually really difficult to see the path outline, which is why I will get rid of all the snow in a second. And actually where it meets, so it comes back to the surface, it's quite an ugly join, so I'm going to go and cover that with an Arctic building a little bit later on. While the snow's gone, it's actually a really good opportunity to show you guys just how awkward the snow tiles look when there isn't snow everywhere. It does stick out like a sore thumb. And then once I put the snow back, I'm going to go and surround the underwater viewing area with glass, just to help seal it off, prevent the bears from escaping, and that'll allow us to put the water back. So once you put the water in, you can go back to the glass barrier and shrink that to just above the water line, and then I'm going to drop the shipwreck piece to act as a cover and help protect the guests from the bears. And then I'm going to go in with the ice rocks and just seal up all the gaps, and I'm actually going to put in a couple of smaller icebergs just to help tie that shipwreck piece in with the rest of the habitat. While I'm in the rock texturing option, if you like, I'm actually going to go in and place some more rocks on the shore side of the mountain range, again just to help tie in the terrain modifications that we've been doing into the rest of the habitat. And then the last thing that I wanted to do was go and put in some foliage. I think there's a bit of a bug in the game at the moment, which means that the polar bears hate all of the different foliage options that we have. But because these are from the right biome, the bears don't mind too much. And so I decided to sacrifice a couple of percentage points of their happiness just to make the habitat look a bit better. And then I'm only sticking to 2 different types of trees just to help minimise that upset. And then once I've put in the enrichment items again, I think it is time to reintroduce our polar bears. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a like. And I'll see you guys next time. Cheerio!